29th, 2016. As always, I'm here. My name is John Glover, as I've just indicated, and I'm here to share with you all the God order news, which everyone needs to hear and digest. That God order news is that God has ordained a black man, Professor G2j, with the ultimate intelligence of eta sub infinity. Eta sub n is the formula that exactly represents intelligence, and n is the level of intelligence. God has designed the n for Professor G2j to be infinity, hence eta sub infinity. And since black people share the same genes as Professor G2j, God has reordained the black race, not just the most intelligent race, but the richest race and the most undefeatable or powerful race. God Almighty's grand unified theorem, nicknamed GAGUT, is a revelation from God which infallibly proved that all theorems, also called everything that exists, and all equations, also called morphisms, which can be isomorphisms or polymorphisms, past, present, and future, originate out of one invariant, Gi, with orthogonal components, Gij, and with a divergence, also known as change, of Gij, j equals 0. In mathematics, you can choose any term or any term to define a quantity. For example, just because God defined Gi to be God doesn't automatically prove it is God. For example, one can say milk originates out of the store. If the store is the ultimate origin point of the milk, you can replace the term originates out of with its equivalent created by. As we all know, milk doesn't originate out of the stores. It originates out of the cows. In that case, you cannot use the term originates out of for the store, nor can you replace the term originates out of with created by. However, GAGUT infallibly proved that Gi is the ultimate origin of all theorems, called everything that exists. So the phrase originates out of can be replaced with created by for the store. For Gij in this particular case. And this Gij defined here represents God, since God can be defined as the creator of everything. Now that God has been infallibly defined as Gij, God's existence is infallibly proven if GAGUT can prove that something exists. And this is quite easily done, which can be demonstrated by just showing a human being exists, like yourselves or myself. The existence of a human being is the proof of the existence of the Gij, because the Gij has been infallibly proven to be the ultimate origin of everything. Therefore, since a human being exists, it infallibly proves the existence of Gij, and this is infallibly proven to be the definition of God. Therefore, human beings infallibly proves the existence of God. Morphisms, which I described before, which can be isomorphisms or polymorphisms, they're also known in mathematics as equations. They map realities onto a mathematical space. Like the brains use our senses like our eyes, our hands, and other senses to process and understand data. And in effect, these morphisms represent or measure intelligence. Since Gij, which infallibly defines God, has the totality of all equations, Gij and hence God constitutes the totality of all intelligence. The GAGUT solution, eta sub n, which all come out of Gij, or God, fundamentally represents all isomorphisms and all polymorphisms, and therefore contains all of intelligence. This also infallibly proved that God not only contains all of intelligence, but God is all of intelligence. And God amazingly planted all eta sub n's, and hence all of intelligence, inside the brains of Professor Gabriel G2j, and blessed him with the ultimate or totality of all intelligence with which to understand God or anything. This is how God ordained Professor G2j with the totality of all intelligence, or the ultimate intelligence, which can be modestly stated as God has ordained Professor G2j, the greatest genius and most intelligent human being ever created. Since the black race share Professor G2j's genes, God has reordained the black people by extension to be the most intelligent race. And this has been confirmed by various Jim Crow organizations such as Göttingen University, and Yale University, and others. Just to share with some of those particular institutions who have basically shown this change in terms of Professor Jagibo being ordained as the most intelligent human being or the greatest genius that can never be surpassed. I would like to bring to your attention the list from Göttingen University, which I'm going to bring up on my screen at this time so that you all can see it. Can you all see the Gauss 2005 list celebration in front of you? Can everyone see it? Hello?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, I'm glad that everyone can see it. This is the list from Göttingen University in terms of the Gauss Year 2005 celebration, where they selected the greatest mathematics works to honor the greatest mathematician, Professor Carl Friedrich Gauss. In that year of 2005, for each week, as there being 52 weeks in a year, they selected the greatest mathematics work for each week of the year to honor Gauss. So for each of those 52 weeks, there was a work selected. GAGUT was selected as the number 26, week 26, but the center of the celebration. If you divide 52 by 2, you get 26. And in effect, was placed as the #1 work to honor Professor Carl Friedrich Gauss in the year 2005. To understand this placing of GAGUT placed as the central work to honor Gauss, it is important to understand some of the runners-up for that position at week 26. If you're at the screen now, you'll see NR19, which represents week 19. You'll see the name Sir Professor Michael Atiyah and Daniel Iagonitzer in terms of field medalist lectures. So you all might probably have heard, but I'll go over it again. In terms of who is Sir Professor Michael Atiyah. Well, Sir Professor Michael Atiyah, as is indicated from his Wikipedia page, is a field medalist, which I'm bringing up to your attention, but more importantly, he's a successor to Sir Professor Isaac Newton at Cambridge University. If you are looking at your screen now, you'll see the actual Wikipedia page for Sir Professor Michael Atiyah. You'll see he's a field medalist, but more importantly, he held the title of Master of Trinity College in Cambridge. That's the prestigious mathematics chair, which Newton, Sir Isaac Newton, Sir Professor Isaac Newton once held also at Cambridge. And as I was stating before, Sir Professor Michael Atiyah is a field medalist. Field medal is an award which is equivalent to Nobel Prize, as you can see here if you click on the link for field medal. Just give it some time to load. You said field medal, if you read here in the last of the 2 sentences of the first paragraph. The field medal have often been described as the mathematician's Nobel Prize. So Sir Professor Michael Atiyah has won that award. The work that was titled at that listing, week 19, Field Medalist Lectures, being plural, means that there's, at that time, since the field medal's inception, which was 1936, up until that year, 2005, there were at least 44 Nobel Prize Award equivalents or field medals issued. As you can see here, Atiyah, right here on the screen, he won the field medal in 1966. But as I'm scrolling down, you can see the names of the people who have won the award over the years prior to the year 2005. So as we get up to this point, you see there are 44 field medalists or Nobel Prize Award equivalents which were listed in that work at week 19. Göttingen could have easily selected a successor to Sir Professor Isaac Newton in the case of Sir Professor Michael Atiyah as a work to honor Gauss in placing in the central work, and a work that contains 44 Nobel Prize Award equivalents at that position at week 26. However, Göttingen ranked that work inferior to GAGUT, which is why it was placed at week 19 as opposed to week 26. So what's important to understand is that that work was placed as week 19 as opposed to week 26. Then if you go to week 23 on that same list, you'll see the name circled here, Anatoly Fomenko. Anatoly Fomenko, if you're asking who he is, Anatoly Fomenko is a current-day mathematician in the Russian university system known as Moscow State University. He is a successor to another famous European mathematician by the name of Professor Leonard Euler, which is here. I hope everyone can see the pages up on their screens. Can everyone see it? Can everyone see on their screens the pages?
Yes, thank you.
Yes. As you're looking at Professor Euler's page, you'll notice that Professor Euler worked in the same university system as Professor Anatoly T. Fomenko works in terms of the University Russian system of the Leningrad Moscow State University systems. And Euler, along with Newton and Gauss, make up the top 3 European mathematicians prior to GAGUT. So what's important to understand here is that Fomenko is a successor to Euler. Göttingen could have ranked Fomenko's work, since he's a successor to one of the 3 greatest European mathematicians, as essential work to honor Gauss. However, they ranked that work inferior to GAGUT, which is why his work is placed at NR23, or week 23, as opposed to week 26. If you go to week 24, you'll see the name David Hilbert, which deals with a work coming from a professor who is known as the last of the great mathematicians. If you're looking now, you'll see his page on Wikipedia. You'll see Hilbert comes from Göttingen University. He is also considered one of the most influential and universal mathematicians of the 19th and early 20th centuries, which is why he has the moniker of last of the great mathematicians. He is also known for popularizing the search for the Riemann Hypothesis. In terms of the 1900s, he listed the Riemann Hypothesis as the most important unsolved mathematics problem at that time had not been solved, which GAGUT solved in 1990. But at the time he was writing his list in 1900, it had not been solved. He popularized the search for the Riemann Hypothesis solution. Hilbert also oversaw 69 PhDs in mathematics. If you're looking at the right-hand side of the screen that I'm at, you'll see the doctoral students, the list of the names here. One such famous one, as you can see highlighted, or the cursor's on right now, is a professor by the name of Richard Courant, who ultimately left Germany to come to America in the early 20th century to create what's called the Courant Institute of Mathematics in New York University in New York City. But as you can see, which I'll scroll down, you can see the long list of names, of the 69 of them to be exact, in terms of doctoral students under him that got PhDs and became famous mathematicians in their own right. And like I said, he comes from Göttingen University, as you can see the cursor is highlighted now. So he was a successor to Professor Carl Friedrich Gauss, who you'll see on the screen up now. Professor Gauss, as I was indicating to you before, is considered to be the greatest mathematician since antiquity and the foremost of mathematicians. He was the mathematician who was being honored and commemorated in the 150th anniversary since his passing in the Gauss year 2005 celebration. Hilbert was a successor to Gauss. Now, Göttingen could have easily selected Hilbert, since he comes from Göttingen, as the central person to honor Professor Carl Friedrich Gauss. He's the last of the great mathematicians, oversaw 69 PhDs in mathematics, and is a successor to Professor Carl Friedrich Gauss. However, Göttingen painfully ranked his work inferior to GAGUT, which is why Hilbert is placed at week 24 as opposed to week 26. GAGUT was placed at week 26, the center of the celebration, because GAGUT has decoded that mathematics, despite the fancy terminology, is a study of theorems. And GAGUT, by its definition, God Almighty's grand unified theorem, means it contains all theorems, hence the last part of it, unified theorem. It contains all theorems. Since GAGUT contains all theorems, and since mathematics is the study of theorems, GAGUT can be decoded as the study of mathematics. And what that means, or contains all of mathematics. And why that's particularly important is that that means it can reproduce the work of week 19 in terms of Sir Professor Michael Atiyah and the other 43 field medalists or Nobel Prize award winners. It can reproduce the work of week 23 with Anatoly T. Fomenko. It can reproduce the work of David Hilbert in week 24. It can also reproduce the works of Sir Professor Isaac Newton. It can reproduce the work of Professor Leonard Euler. It can reproduce the work of Professor Bernard Riemann and the work of Professor Carl Friedrich Gauss and every other mathematical work on this list and not on the list, provided that the work is correct. This is in effect how the German people have surrendered. Prior to GAGUT, Gauss was considered to be the #1 mathematician. After GAGUT, they surrendered that baton, or that the excellence in terms of Gauss, who before GAGUT was considered to be the greatest mathematician. They have handed over the baton over to Professor Oyibo, who is now the greatest mathematician of all time that can never be surpassed. Past present, and future. It means that now in light of GAGUT, there's no work that can supersede or go beyond GAGUT. All mathematics works, whether they've been discovered, which is the past, which is current day mathematics, which is the present, or future, any mathematical formula that may be developed in the future, all are embedded within GAGUT. This is how the Germans have now surrendered over from Gauss now to Professor Yibo as the greatest mathematician of all time that can never be surpassed. So that's one thing that's very important for everyone to understand in terms of the surrender from Göttingen. But it didn't just end there. There's also a surrender also from Asia, represented by a professor by the name of Krishendu Dasgupta, an Indian professor who, in effect, was searching for, at the time, what they were looking for, which is a unified field theory, but had failed in coming up with that. But upon discovering Professor Yibo, discovering GAGUT, he wrote us an email to our university, which I'm going to go over with everyone today, just very quickly. If you can, you'll see on your screen the letter, which is, I hope everyone can see the letter, in terms of Physics Professor Dasgupta, India, concludes that Professor Gio Yibo is closer to God than any other human being because of GAGUT discovery. This was an email that was written about 9 years ago on July 25th, 2007. And as you can see here at the title of the subject, it's God's Mission Dasgupta. To give some quick background, Dasgupta comes from a top 20 university called Jamia Millia Islamia. If you're looking at this page here, you will see a paper that was co-authored by Professor Dasgupta, as you can see circled here, coming from the Department of Physics, Jamia Millia Islamia, which is based in India. It's a top 20 school in India that was funded by the King of Saudi Arabia. And Dasgupta comes from India, which is, Indians have won a great deal of Nobel Prizes in search for the grand unified theorem or unified field theory. If you see the letter here, God's Mission Dasgupta, you'll see the following message that he wrote to our university. Dear Oyibo, good day. I heard that you've been successful in finding the unified field theory. Congratulations. You are more close to God than any of us. I was also working upon this theory. Since my theory was different, God was different to me. Please write to me, as I would like to know where I was wrong. Thanking you, yours, Krishendu Dasgupta. When you see Dasgupta declaring Professor Gio Yibo more close to God than any of us, this is a direct inversion of the caste system in India. The caste system prior to GAGUT, there was a mentality of the so-called lighter skinned you are in society, the higher you are in society. And as you get into the darker and darker skin tones, you get in a lower position in the so-called caste system. And also Indians, also because of the Jim Crow mentality, have been conned into believing that even if they are of darker skin than a black person, they will still see themselves as being better. In light of the GAGUT discovery, Dasgupta, who came from that background, now was forced to recognize, due to GAGUT, a black man as being superior to all of the so-called Indian and non-blacks. And in effect, when he declared Professor Yibo as being closer to God than any of us, it is direct inversion of the caste system, which means it has destroyed the caste system. Also, Dasgupta comes from an Islamic background, which means that he would see Muhammad as a very prominent religious figure in terms of his religion. When he declared Professor Yibo as being closer to God than any of us, he could have said Professor Yibo is a prophet like Muhammad or close to Muhammad. He didn't say that. When he said that Professor Yibo is closer to God than any of us, he's saying that Professor Yibo supersedes Muhammad. Just as if he were a Christian, the most prominent feature would be replaced with Jesus Christ. When he said that Professor Yibo is closer to God than any of us, he didn't say Professor Yibo is close to Jesus Christ or a prophet like Jesus Christ or Messiah like Jesus Christ. He said by declaring Professor Yibo closer to God than any of us, he is basically saying that Professor Yibo supersedes Jesus Christ. This is coming from a system that is viewed as so-called black people as the elite or untouchables. Now, by him declaring such a person as being closer to God, it is a surrender, which Dasgupta represents about 1 billion population in India. And then if you consider the rest of Asia in terms of China, who in the People's Daily, the world's 5th largest newspaper, who published an article on GAGUT winning the greatest academic prize in history in 2006. That would include another 1.3 billion, and in effect, it's basically about 3 billion people in Asia have basically now recognized a black man as being closer to God than any of us. and that Professor Joe Ubel has been blessed by God with the ultimate intelligence. So it is not just that Göttingen that is surrendered. It is also Asia, and Göttingen represents Europe. And in addition to that, there's also the Yale study from from Yale here in America. The Yale study was conducted 7 years after the formal announcement of GAGUT in 1990, in year 1997. If you're all looking at the page, you'll see the highlighted year circled as 1997. The title of the research study is as follows. It's a nuclear DNA diversity in worldwide distributed human populations. Can everyone see that? Can everyone see the title? Can everyone see the title?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I see. Sorry about that.
Praise God. And as you can see, the journal, this was funded by President Bill Clinton's administration during the Genome Project, in terms of the Genome Mapping Project. You can see the journal up here in the top in terms of International Journal on Gene and Genomes, published by, in the upper left-hand corner, Elsevier. And if you notice under the title, you see the name circled here, Kenneth K. Kidd. Kenneth K. Kidd is, if you see the superscript B, sorry about that, the superscript B corresponds to Yale University School of Medicine, Department of Genetics, 333 Cedar Street, New Haven, Connecticut, 06510, USA. So Professor Kenneth K. Kidd, who was the lead researcher in this particular research, was from the Yale in Connecticut. Why this is particularly important is Kenneth K. Kidd, if you can see from the initials, illustrates the white supremacy of this particular research in terms of it was expected, if they'd gone along with the necessary Jim Crow mentality, that in such a research they would have gotten a result that would have reflected what they wanted to believe. However, what this particular research did, which is very important, is illustrated by the abstract, which I'm scrolling down to, and if you go to the fourth line, which is where the cursor is right now, if you begin at the sentence here, which begins with in this way, the European bias in the nuclear polymorphism ascertainment has been avoided. We go to the term European bias here. What does that mean? European bias is a synonym for Jim Crow. What the sentence has said, in effect, in the abstract, the fourth line of the abstract, is that they had to remove the European bias in order to obtain the correct results. The goal of this particular research is to take the A to sub n equation, the formula for intelligence, which GAGUT brought about, into the labs to determine the intelligence of the black people, and then that intelligence compared to non-blacks. But in order to obtain the correct results, they had to make sure that in their research, the Jim Crow or the European bias was removed. Once that was removed, they were able to obtain the correct results. And this is illustrated by the sixth line of this abstract, starting with the term 15 polymorphisms. In that sentence, it says 15 polymorphisms were shared among most of the populations compared, whereas 13 sites were found to be endemic to Africans and 4 to non-Africans. What does this statement mean? Well, the 15 polymorphisms referred to, as I was describing before, polymorphisms are a measure of intelligence. And the more polymorphisms an organism has, the more intelligent it is. What they have determined is there are 15 polymorphisms shared amongst all humans, in terms of whatever you are, black or non-black, there's a base 15 polymorphism count. But in the case of black people, there's a 13 additional or extra polymorphisms. That's what it means. 13 sites are found to be endemic to Africans. So if you take the 15, which is a base number, and add 13 to that, 15 plus 13 is 28. So the black people have 28 polymorphisms. And polymorphisms corresponds to the A to sub n equation in the sense of the n number is the number of polymorphisms. So when there are 28 polymorphisms, that means there's an 8 to sub 28 level of intelligence for the black people. They've also stated that there are 4 polymorphisms that are endemic to non-Africans, non-blacks. So if you take the 15 polymorphisms and add 4 to that, 15 plus 4 is 19 polymorphisms. That's for the non-blacks, which are represented by Asians, Jews, whites, and so forth. So what this particular research study has said is, in light of removing the Jim Crow bias or the European bias, they have obtained the correct result using the A to sub n equation in terms of the black people are the most intelligent race, with 28 intelligence DNA strands or polymorphisms, or 8 to sub 28, as opposed to non-blacks who have 19 polymorphisms or intelligence DNA strands, or an 8 to sub 19. If you take the ratio of black to non-black of intelligence, which is 28 to 19, and you round and estimate it a little bit to make the point clearer, you can bring the 28 approximately up to 30, and you can bring 19 down to 18. So that ratio of 28 to 19 is now 30 to 18. This is being done to make a point. If you take 30 to 18, that approximation, and you divide both of the numbers by 6, since both have a common factor of 6, 30 divided by 6 is 5. 18 divided by 6 is 3. That ratio now becomes 5 to 3. That ratio can be put in a fraction form, which is 5 over 3. What you're going to understand today is that 5 over 3 fraction is an inversion of the 3/5 that Jim Crow propagated and projected on the black people. The fraud of the 3/5 intelligence of the black people has now been inverted through GAGUT, which has been confirmed by the Yale study. Instead of being 3/5 of a human being or 3/5 intelligence, or 60% of a normal human being intelligence, you now have 5/3 of a human being's intelligence. 5/3 being a mixed numeral, a improper fraction, can be turned into a mixed numeral of 1 and 2/3, which can be converted into a percentage, which is approximately 167%. If you take 100% to be a normal human being, black people have 167%, which means that percentage is obviously above 100%, which makes black people superhumans. That is what the Yale study, which was conducted by Jim Crow, was not conducted by black universities, conducted by Jim Crow universities, and they have now confirmed, like Gottingen has confirmed, and Dasgupta, representing Asia, have confirmed that the black people are the most intelligent, and Professor Oyibo, having 8 to sub infinity intelligence, makes him the greatest genius or greatest intelligence or the greatest mathematician of all time that can never be surpassed, past, present, and future. So this is some things that we want to share with the audience and to get everyone to understand in terms of what this particular briefing is taking place today, is getting our people to understand these surrenders from Jim Crow and the various organizations in terms of recognizing the intelligence of the black people. So it's mathematical, it's scientific, and official. After 2,500 years of fraud regarding the intelligence of the black race, God has blessed and ordained Professor Joe Oyibo with the ultimate intelligence of 8 to sub infinity. And since we as black people share the same genes as Professor Joe Oyibo, we have now been blessed and ordained by God as being not just the most intelligent race, but the richest race and the most undefeatable and powerful race. And it is upon this we want to share with you all today what is going on with the BBC regarding the GAGUT solution to the G2j solution to the Riemann Hypothesis. So if everyone's now ready, we are now going to connect you all to Professor Oyibo. Is everyone now ready?
Yes, I am.
Everyone's ready.
We're ready.
Praise God. Okay, and without any further ado, I'm going to now connect the professor. Please hold. Just 1 second. Just 1 second, everyone. Please hold. Yes, everyone, here's the professor.
Good morning and good evening
to everyone. It's
Good
nice
evening to you, Professor.
Thank you very much. It's nice to.
Hey, good evening.
Yeah, good evening. Yes, nice to be back with you again, and to continue from where we stopped yesterday. And what we're trying to do is to really follow God order that returns us back to the way God created us. So we could begin not only to talk God's language, but also to live the God language. That's really the essence of our being created. So what I was going on trying to share with you yesterday is deviations from the God order. And, you know, in the world where, in the world where every creature is trying to get attention, where every creature wants to be the center of it all, we've seen a lot of disasters. One of the most notable is God being presented in a picture that shows God to, on an intelligence scale, be right in the bottom. You know, that is obviously why God sent GAGUT. So that is what we're trying to continue today, because see, the whole essence of our existence cannot be realized until we begin to understand the God order or the God language. God said, and there was. You know, the word of God, the sound from the word transforms into we as creatures. So it's a transformation. So what has happened is, as a result of the revelation, Gij, comma j equal to 0, can we pull up the formula? Yes. What we were blessed with is an extraordinary privilege of, you know, understanding how God created the universe and the origin of everything, you know, that only God could have created. And what you see in that equation then is equation, the God order that says, you know, where everything came from, which is to the right. God is right, God is on the right, and is the 0. It comes from an invariant. And you take a change of invariant, you also get an invariant. So the 0 there is the invariant, meaning the reference point. You know, for you to measure how much you've traveled, you need an origin, a reference point. To know how far you moved, again, you need to know where you were to get your bearing. So all this come together in this equation, Gij, comma j equal to 0. So what happens is, there's a unity, a unification into one. So what God has done is the greatest miracle that people like Stephen Hawking never thought was going to be possible. In terms of, in 1991, ironically, when GAGUT, you know, 1 year after GAGUT has really evolved, he had a brief history of time, you know, peace. wrote a book and was actually translated into a movie, where he was saying that he could not see a possibility of God revealing what was on God's mind while God was creating the universe. Now, since then, of course, he has gone in all kinds of directions. One of them being saying that he didn't believe in God and all that. But those are part of the dynamics of the confusion in terms of really not understanding reality. So this is extremely critical in that respect. In other words, this is the reality. And the Gij, therefore, is God. God in God's material, which is I, and space-time, which is J, comma J, that's God. So God is an invariant. God was the reference point where everything came from. So that's what is the question. That's the beauty. It's more than the beauty, it's just godly. Now, so in the process then, we have one source. And we all came out of that one source. And so everybody can trace their origin there. And so when you begin to see that there's one commonality amongst everything, when humans were struggling with it, nobody, just like Stephen Hawking identified, nobody had any idea such a complicated, overwhelmingly complex world could end up in such an elegant mode or fashion or presentation. But that is it right before your eyes. So not only does it show us our common source, but our connectivity to that common source. And in the process, you're able to see connectivity between ourselves, in terms of how we relate with one another. So what God has revealed in effect is to say, for example, how do we relate with one another? First of all, God didn't end in revealing this and showing to my brains. In reality, what God did was to use me as a piece of chalk to write the totality of reality to all God's creatures. In the process, I became totally aware, since I'm a piece of chalk that is being used by God to write. So I'm part and parcel of what God is writing, which is why I'm able to see everything, which is why I'm able to feel everything, which is why I'm able to make a presentation. And so it's kind of hard to actually explain the feeling. It is it's the ultimate feeling. When I say I feel heaven, I feel like I'm in heaven. It is not an exaggeration. And so the only way I could actually pass that on to you folks is to make you come along with me so you can feel the journey of being in heaven, of feeling the heaven. That is the only way I could make you feel, because it's not to tell you and make you excuse me, and make you believe it, because especially since you've heard a lot of things before, in terms of people claiming all kinds of things, excuse me. And so the only way that you can understand that is if I'm able to bring you to feel it. And in many ways, that is what one of the things I'm trying to do right now, is to make you feel what I'm talking about. The idea of being in heaven. The idea of feeling the heaven. And so that's what we're talking about. Now, God revealed the solution. Again, put it in my head. The solution to the one description of reality. In this process, so you can kind of relate with one of the sub-issues we're dealing with, which is the Jim Crow attempt to neutralize our reality, is that you have to see the dynamics of the unity. Unity. There has to be a dynamics of the unity, how we unify. First is the source. We have one common source, which is God. And like I said before, that makes this equation, this theorem, the holiest theorem, the God's theorem, the ultimate theorem, because it reminds us of where we come from and how that unifies us. We want peace. And so it also defines our goal or the purpose of our being created, which is to glorify God, to allow that source to shine through us. So the God order therefore compels me to indoctrinate you to understand that you are only here to glorify the Almighty God. As parents, we try to indoctrinate our child to be very best, obviously. And one of the reasons is, yes, because the child is a reflection of us. Okay? The child reflects, what we stand for. So the same thing with the Creator. We are a reflection. We're supposed to be a reflection of the Creator. So that means we must give the best reflection. We must approach perfection. And what God has shown here, this is perfection. The equation here is perfection. And you're going to be finding yourself in this equation. And then understand that perfection is the key word. God is perfect. We come from God. We must be perfect. A few things are thrown around and say, oh, we can all be perfect and all that. Well, the dynamics of how that works, you understand, is one thing, but you can't just start and just convince yourself you can't be perfect, therefore whatever comes, comes. That is not how God works. Even if you're going to be imperfect, you cannot start out just succumbing to the belief of being imperfect. You're going to give it your best shot, and in many ways, that is the dynamics of how this came up. Okay, you understand? So you're going to discover yourself and understand that you're supposed to be a reflection of your source, where you come from. And you're supposed to help each other so that individually and collectively you can consummate that reflection. and God then becomes happy. So it's saying that there's no room for accepting the concept of death. There's nothing what I said that says, gee, death is a great kind of thing. I didn't say anything. There's nowhere where I've said that so far. There's no room for death in reality. The death comes in when we ignore the primary purpose of reflecting the Creator. The Creator is alive all the time. The Creator doesn't die. Death comes from ignorance. Ignorance creates death. And in a little reflection, you can see that. Nobody goes step on a snake if they know the snake is there, and even before that, know the snake is dangerous. The snake is dangerous or deadly. So the only way there for anybody can actually step on the snake is if they don't know. And that therefore sets one the possibility of getting bitten and actually losing one's life. That's a very clear case of not knowing being the source of death. So death is not something we're created with as a goal. Just like I was saying yesterday, that no mother gives birth to a child and expecting the child to transform on anytime soon. Transform on is the terminology we use gagotically because it's all about transformation. What you call death, which is actually a dynamics of the life waves of our body, developing escape velocity with which it lifts the body. So that, is a transformation. The life waves go away from us and the material part remains, and which proves that our life waves and the wave component, our spiritual component, actually runs the body, because that's the more direct part of the Creator. So, Creator, when the Creator agreed to be with us, it was supposed to be an everlasting partnership. But when we fail to take care of our bodies, when we fail to be righteous, when we fail to express love and appreciation of the Creator, when we indulge into non-righteousness and things like that, that's where all that come out from. So, but commonality in terms among us, we the creatures, like I said, the origin, the source, common great-grandfather, grandmother, grandparent. If we could remember that, love would automatically evolve in our system. This is what is being shown here as well. We are one. We have the same source. We have the same parents, grandparents. But that will not be easily appreciated if you didn't have something like this. Therefore, there was a need. To say there was a need for this revelation from God is an understatement. So, but now you begin to see it and see the commonality. And then you begin to feel the coming of, real unity and love. Because people don't kill their brothers and their sisters. The common origin says we are brothers and sisters. Therefore, you understand, we see how foreign the whole idea of killing or hatred or anything of that kind are supposed to be. So that's one thing this does. We also know, but not very consciously, that we all do We breathe like every other creature or living creature. We eat, like, you understand, there's a lot of things we share. But usually we don't really dwell on that to say, oh, that says something we have in common, and begin to explore that and begin to feel for each other. You know, so the whole idea of really commonality is extremely critical. Commonality, common origin, common common things that we all do. It might be on an individual level, but it's similar, it's the same. Okay? And I was blessed. I was blessed as a child. People accuse me of all the time and say, well, you know, your reaction to death is weird. You understand? But you know, in saying that and seeing how, you understand, in my system, it is so natural that I should be upset, to say the least, saying the least, to see a life, even an ant's life, but certainly human life. You know, it bothers me, and as far as I can remember, you know, it has always been like that with me. But it is a power, it's not a weakness. Because what God has done with this equation, for example, is to make me not only a creature with the ultimate intelligence, but a creature with the ultimate power, and a creature with the ultimate wealth. And talking about wealth, they're all connected, obviously. You know, wealth, power, and intelligence. The only thing you do with your money is to buy product of intelligence. A car, a pencil, and things like that. That comes out of your intelligence. So if somehow you could produce everything you need, you don't need money, human money, the Jim Crow dollars, you say. So it's about productivity, it's about intelligence. Therefore, if you have intelligence, you got everything. You're the most, the richest, the wealthiest. Now, in terms of the power, again, the tools that we use in getting things done are conceptualized and the product of the brains. That's your mind intelligence. The more intelligence you have, the more you can conceive, design, and produce those kind of things. And for us black people, that's what we do best because God created us the most intelligent. And power, of course, you know, it goes along, like I said before. The power is a creative power. There's a creative power and a destructive power. So our focus, consistent with the Creator's example, is the constructive power, creative power. And the less intelligent you are, the less creative focus you're going to have. So your time is going to be concentrating on something that's less creative. You want shortcuts. You're impatient. You rather take somebody else's. You know, which is why in African philosophy, there is no stealing. Stealing is forbidden in African culture. Okay? Because when you steal is an inferiority complex. is an admitting that you are incapable, that you have no intelligence. That's the only basis. Because if you have intelligence, you produce it yourself. Why do you have to take somebody else's? Produce yours. That's the philosophy. That's the African philosophy. The same way we don't go killing people with love line, especially our children. The Africans will name a child. Child is better, more important, more valuable than money. That's an African proverb which defines our connectivity with our children. So when fairy tales are pushed around, it's not a fairy tale in terms of it being benign. Terroristic tales are being pushed around with regards to us in terms of we enslaved our children and all that. That's a fraud, absolute fraud. The African values their children so much. Their whole life is dedicated to the children. Everything they have. I can say that about my father, and I'm sure all of you, in some way, even in the bad situations, you can feel at least a glimpse of that in your life somewhere. So accusing us of selling our children is the worst kind of misrepresentation of a people. So therefore, we show love. Love is power. Love is intelligence. We do not steal. As a matter of fact, these values are embodied in what was called the negative confessions. Way back, the days where we're called Gala people. Gala. Every black person was once called Gala. That's why the legacy still remains in South Carolina, the Galas and the Gitchis. So the ancient Africans were called Gala people. And the translation of Gala means invincible. Invincible, because you are the highest level of intelligence. So intelligence brings you money and brings you power. So there's no way anybody can turn you around. So as a result, we didn't have anything like, crime is not something we entertain. There's no room for crime. So we didn't have prisons. There's no reason for prison. Like I said before, stealing is such a disgrace to you and your family that you don't even think of it. A rumor that you have stolen can wipe out the whole respect that you could have in your family. So, that is no. Therefore, if you don't steal, and these negative confessions, over 40 of them, which is where the so-called 10 Commandments came from. It stole that from our what we call negative confession, something that you do not even consider doing. It's a no. It's what is called, So they picked some 10 of them, and then they call it the 10 Commandments. That's all an African concept. So in the process of adhering to this, because we know that's a God order, it was a semi-heaven. There was no room for us to do non-righteous things. We're too busy doing righteous things. So I give you that to get back to the topic of what Jim Crow has done in terms of clay math. Clay math has, as you saw yesterday, began attacking GAGUT and has the power of Jim Crow, behind it. They were pushing the grand unified theory. That's the search for that is the ultimate search. They were pushing that up until it came out in 1990 through GAGUT. And once that has happened, and it was not revealed to them, there became a necessity for them to come up with something else where they believe they can have a chance of scoring. Now, while they need to have a continuity in the human endeavor dynamics, what is important is to be able to recognize what has been accomplished. And in this case, the ultimate accomplishment. This little thing that you see in front of you there is the ultimate. So what happened was a setup was done 10 years later because they were hoping it would be stolen, or it would be, somehow we will surrender it. And even though there's been a lot of inertia amongst our people, there are people who, once in a while get touched by it. And so that has been continuously been transmitted among each other, among our people. And so there's a tie-in. So what Jim Crow did then in terms of clay was to set up. They came out of nowhere, money was put in it, and then the fraud actually began. So one of the things they have to do is to ignore GAGUT. Pull up data event for me.
Just 1 second, everyone.
It as a band formula. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Good.
Yes, thank you.
Yes. All right. Now, we saw before the Gij, comma j equal to 0 is the theorem. And there are all kinds of ways you can try to prove that theorem, and it has all been done. But the real proof is the eta sub n. The real proof is the eta sub n. You know, the equation itself is infallible, but until you could see the results from it, you know, the proof that the infallibility proof could just amount, you know, could be amounting to just abstraction. So, but what you see here, eta sub n, again, very short equation, right? There is nothing that's in the universe that's not in there. These are part of the miracles. Equation is the shortest. The solution is also the shortest. This is to compel every creature that begins to feel it to understand this came from God. So this is why when this came out in such an infallible way, the non-blacks, in terms of Jim Crow, who have been perpetrating fraud, especially in the last 2,500 years, were overwhelmed. And so they do what they do best. They began to do it, you understand, to bring in fraud, to bring in misrepresentation. And in some cases, first of all, by 1999, there were reports, because 1999 the news actually broke out, because between 1990 and 1999, what was going on with GAGUT was an extensive review by mathematicians and all kinds of systems. It took 9 years for, you know, that in the process, of course, American Mathematical Society and all that began to, you know, they were looking for every which way to disprove it. However, by 1999, of course, 1995 was very critical in that conference. And so we had the legends of mathematics, those who are alive, were invited to this briefing in Troy, New York. One of the invitees, well, first of all, we're celebrating Professor George Handelman, who was one of my teachers, my professors. He used to head the math department at Brown University, an Ivy League. And was credited as really being one of the pioneers in what was called the American Applied Mathematics. And then, so you have a former head of math department at Brown University. There was a former head of math department from Caltech and UCLA in one person, Professor Julian Cole. And I remember him, he has since, they're all transformed on. I remember Julian Cole, Professor Julian Cole, sitting in the audience, right in the front, almost, you know, very close to the front line. And I remember him holding his jaws with two hands, you know, watching the presentation. He was overwhelmed. And then there was the former head of math department at Stanford University. That's Professor Paul Garabedian, you know, who graduated from Harvard University at the age of 20 years old. He was born in fall or summer, late summer of, actually in August of 1928 and no, I'm sorry, 1927. But graduated before his 21st birthday in 1948. So, one of the youngest person, the PhD in mathematics from Harvard University. And then went on to not only head, but built what today is the Stanford University Mathematics Department. He attended that conference. And for those of you who have gotten the journals, his paper is published in the journal, in the GAGUT Journal of Mathematics, GAGUT Journal, Radical and Research Journal. His paper, Paul Garavida's paper, is published in there. And I consider him as a mentor, but extremely brilliant individual, a genius in reality. So he was there, he was in the audience, he was, attended the briefing or the presentation. So Lee Siegel, was there, Professor Lee Siegel, PhD from MIT, and one of the legends, what is called mathematical biology. Their works are all, they all handed me their work and asked me to review them. And I compiled all of them, and it was published in a proceeding called Applied Mathematics, Methods and Applications. So that's what after the proceeding. But during the proceeding, the whole reaction, I mean, it was a revolution in terms of, especially it couldn't come from the most unexpected source. That's from black people, and people were talking to each other, they were talking to themselves. My family will witness some of the big shots. A guy from Caltech, and Lee Siegel, they were talking and said, gee, this thing, they were talking. Everybody was talking to us. But anyway, so GAGUT not only survived that, but went into any number of modes of verifications and criticisms and so on and so forth. Before you know it, the reviews from the American Mathematical Society began to come up, and from European Mathematical Societies. That continued right from that 1995 until 1990, when it became very clear. And it came out in terms of approving of Einstein's theorem. I mean, a theory. This is the dynamics of how the equation actually evolved. You heard about E is equal to mc squared. And whereas from the physical point, people, you could do any number of rational analysis and so on and so forth. For me, yes, I like applied math, and I actually define every mathematics as being applied. But I'm a geometer. I was born to be a geometer, which is the purest of pure mathematics. Geometry. Geometry. As a ja in African language means God. What the European call God. As a matter of fact, the G and the J are the same letter. They're interchangeable. So what we call Jah is mispronounced by non-blacks as being Jod. They turn it into a G, but it's the same word, Jah. So when you hear the Rastas talking Jah, they're talking Gala language. Emperor Haile Selassie was a Gala. What is called the Oromo people today in Ethiopia, their real name is Gala. Okay, so you can see a transformation, a journey from all the way from Ethiopia and Kemet to South Carolina. So anywhere we went, we kept that tradition. So so what happened there was, by 1999, when GAGUT exploded as a result of really finding no one who could disagree with it, the non-blacks who understood the implication of what it means, you know, no, that's all right. They began to be scared. They began to remember what President Jefferson had indicated in terms of if God were a just God, okay, he expresses the fear that what has been done against black people will lead to a very serious punishment for the non-blacks. And so some of the non-blacks therefore began to see this formula as being the evidence of that. And so to the point, and this is a very serious issue, to the point where people actually committed suicide. People, you know, who've been keeping records found that since 1990 up until today, the suicide rate among non-blacks has incredibly increased. You know, so so there's a kind of dynamics. So by 2000, therefore, the reaction in terms of setting up a clear math certainly had that in mind. To say, okay, we got to do something, okay, in order to make GAGUT disappear, or at least neutralize it or minimize it in the best way, so we could have a life. Which again, evidence of lack of thinking, especially about the consequences of our actions. What they were doing in that 2000 and 1999 was something they should have thought about much earlier. They say what happens, at least beginning with the Jeffersons feeling, to say, yeah, if this is going to happen, let's do something right now to make sure it doesn't lead to a bigger disaster. And they didn't do that. So when GAGUT came, therefore, it became such a nightmare, just the appearance of it, that it comes from a black person. And they did all kinds of research to see if they could connect me to some kind of non-black dynamics. Unfortunately, they weren't able to find any. And so, anyway, so the bottom line, therefore, is the dynamics you see with the clay for them, the people with philosophy, is supposed to be a survival technique. So, but when you're surviving on lies, that's really not much of a survival. Fraud cannot keep us surviving too long. But that's what was engaged in. So the goal then was to ignore GAGUT, because what you see here is the solution. It's all the fundamental solutions to construct every reality that, you know, every theorem. In other words, what you had there is the theorem, the equation that represents the unified theorem, the grand unified theorem. But the theorem is not really a theorem until you have proven it. And this is the totality of the proof. So, when you hear he was closer to God, as indicated by Professor Dasgupta, he understands, and if you notice in his writing, he actually took an oath. He had to swear, like using the Bible, for him to make that statement, to convince his viewers and listeners, audience, that he's not fooling around. Well, that's the life of a mathematician. What he was expressing is a theorem, because it's a theorem. In other words, when a person is blessed with all the totality of knowledge, there can't be anything else between such a creature and God. Can't be. So that's what he says. So he knows that to be a fact. He knows that to be a theorem in itself, because that's what it means. And that's why God did it. So in a real mathematical world, that's the only thing he could say. That's a real mathematician. And that's why you saw in his paper, he was working from a physics department in Jamia Millia Islamia University. And the other part is that if he was stretching the truth, if he was exaggerating it or actually trying to fool around, the Muslim world especially would have gone on his case. First of all, he could have been fired, because that is a university, or there's a coalition between various religions and various ideologies, because that was where the formulation of how to get rid of the British from India was formulated. It's like a thing, it began as a think tank kind of dynamic. So, but they also had funding from King of Saudi Arabia. So it has a definite, powerful Islamic presence. Because him saying Oyibo is closer to God is saying that Oyibo is closer to God than the prophets, all the prophets, including Prophet Muhammad and prophets Jesus and everybody else that have come before. And you also know that India's had a lot of gurus. So that revolutionary statement has to be hinged on something, and that hinging is the totality of knowledge, totality of intelligence. Therefore, this formula, it has been therefore measures intelligence. That's what intelligence is, because when n is infinity, okay, you can construct everything that is in the universe. So the map understanding that constructs everything in the universe, it means it has already run through my brains. The writing there passed through my brain before it is written. Therefore, the construction of everything is embedded in there. Construction of every reality, the construction of the proof of every theorem is embedded in there. That includes a Riemann hypothesis theorem. And a theorem is a solution to a problem. A problem calls for a solution. That's what a problem does. Even though people think about the problem, the solution is the real deal. A problem without a solution is not really a problem. It's not worth anything. So when you pose a problem, you're asking for the solution. So the solution really represents the problem. Okay, so therefore, but a solution, a correct solution, infallible solution, is what we call a theorem. For every solution that is correct and infallible, you have a theorem. So, those kind of theorems are the ones that satisfy the GAGUT G equal to 0. And so now you say, okay, if it was correct, you should be able to get some solutions. But if it was perfect and represents every theorem, then you must be able to realize all the solutions. And these pieces here are used for constructing the actual proof of every theorem. So therefore, the theorem for the Riemann hypothesis is in that it has to satisfy the GAGUT G equal to 0 if it's a theorem. Because the statement of the equation is every theorem, or all theorems and all equations that represents the theorem. For every theorem, there are equations. All of them originate out of one invariant, infallibly defined as God, with orthogonal components, Gij, and a divergence, which is a change. When you have an invariant, there's no change in that invariant. And that's the constraint that helps you generate the reality that you started out trying to present a theorem about. So again, everything is so perfect. Not only is the equation perfect, the solutions are perfect. The other day, I was talking to a group, I don't think it was yours, and I was telling them, for example, after this solution here, how you could explain the bending of light waves from a distant star around a big object, a big planet or a big, object. Einstein was struggling with that, extremely serious. He did come up with something, and part of his credit. But GAGUT is so apparent. You understand? You make n equal to 2, and that falls out like magic. So all that, and that's supposed to be physical application, it's just like this in GAGUT. So, and all the miraculous things, Professor Animalu was reviewing it as a mathematician and a physicist trained in Cambridge. You understand, at many points of his reproducing the results, he obviously was amazed and tempted to, put some doubts in himself. But he kept on seeing the truth evolving every time he tried. So when he saw some people who were not knowledgeable trying to fool around, out of his own conviction, he will laugh. He says, no, but you can't get around it. Everywhere I go, everything I do. As a matter of fact, one of the last conversations I had with him, he said, when he writes papers these days, he says, everything he writes and gets right comes out of GAGUT. So he says he's so overwhelmed he can't even reference GAGUT anymore, because he says there's nothing that doesn't come out of GAGUT that is correct. That's what you're listening to tonight. This is the dynamics. This is why we call ground zero heaven. The feeling is one of heavenly feeling. It's the best feeling you can possibly get. That's why I'm trying to get you on the path and begin to experience what I experience. But it's going to take some surrender. You got to submit with the Creator, because it's the Creator stuff. So, and it's on that note, on that basis, that your understanding of the presentation today is important. So you can see what, first, the motivation for the claim math, okay? And which is what I gave before. They were overwhelmed and felt totally knocked out, as a technical knockout. For them to not only, with all the propaganda and the money that were pushing to the search for the unified field theory, it came through the God order source, which is the black people. And there's nothing, no room for any improvement, really. It is so perfect. That is very frustrating. It's so perfect. Okay? The planetary motions are all there. Most of the one that we're familiar with is when n is equal to 1. The planetary motions fall out like that. And when we talk about planetary motion, that's geometry. The dynamics of geometry. The conic sections and so on and so forth. That's, geometry. That expresses the realities, the solar systems. And like I said, I see the whole universe, but most of you have no idea what I'm talking about. With etas of n, I see the entire universe. I just gave you two examples. The etas of 1 gives me the entire solar system and similar star systems, just etas of 1. And I can do a refinement that will adjust every other solar system, and of course galaxies and everything else. So when I say I see the entire universe, that's not a joke. And you're all going to say, well, wait a minute. You look at it in one point. How could you? Well, I see this is the transformed universe for me. Every part of the universe is there.
Praise Jesus. Praise you. Praise God. Praise God.
Amen.
Praise God.
Praise
Amen.
God.
Praise
I really feel the Spirit, what you
Praise
just say.
God.
Praise God.
Praise God. Praise God.
God, sister. Praise God. That is what God ordered me to help you evolve, evoke, get into your spirit and get it via ancestor Mahalia Jackson. You understand? Those of you who have heard about her probably understand.
Yes. Yes, I understand. Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that's what I've been ordered to, get you tuned into. And like those so-called Negro spirituals make us so powerful to take on the...
Oh, man. Oh, man.
Thank you. To take on the atrocities. We're going through all that to reach this point. That's where we are now. You understand?
Yes.
A journey to heaven, you don't expect it to be all cozy. Okay? Otherwise, when you reach heaven, you won't appreciate it. Just like I point out to brothers and sisters who do not understand what's going on here. This is the most valuable thing that God has given to God's creatures. Therefore, that value, that understanding of the value must not only be developed, but must be sustained. That's extremely critical. So that's why Jim Crow tries to cover it up, because the power is just too much. It's the ultimate power. So when Brother Glover says, hey, we're ordained the most intelligent and automatically the richest, and then the most powerful. Invincible, that's the name God gave to us right from the beginning. And God has realized that for us right now, very loud and clear. In an exact code. That's the God order. That's what we call the God order. The God order. So, when God orders, we just go along. And the journey is going to be incredibly fantastic journey. That's the feeling of heaven. That's the feeling of heaven. Because you are in tune with your Creator. The life is so great. The feeling is so awesome. You feel God. That's how I feel. Yesterday, although there were some delays in between, I couldn't believe we did over 10 hours. And many of you, some of you really didn't realize that either. That's what we call time dilation here. And that has to be the way it is in heaven. When time zooms away, is when you are in a godly spirit. You're experiencing God in your lifetime. You understand me? You can't get enough of it. And so time dilates, goes so fast. Before you know it, it's already 2-3 hours. Okay, and I'm trying to really get into the point, but you understand, time is just slipping through. That is heaven. That's the way it has to be in heaven. There's no boredom. There's no even feeling of you don't have a feeling of discomfort. You don't have a feeling of negativity. It's extremely powerful. That's what God does in this mode. So
I have a question.
yes, go ahead.
Yes, my question is, aside from understanding the order and also promoting the book, how else can we use the order in order for us to survive in such a world that's trying to murder us all as black people?
Yes, excellent question. You need the books. You need all the GAGUT books. You need to attend a briefing every month.
Okay.
You need to wear the GAGUT shirts. See, the cops, notice how they wear a uniform. And the uniform has certain dynamics of, certain purposes. When you wear your GAGUT shirt, it is to define who you are. One of the things that it displays is that you created to be a race of geniuses. That is, if you didn't know that before, now you know that. Right?
Yes.
Is there any one of you that has doubts now because you heard from a black person? Okay. I'm nice and black. Maybe you need to see my picture again, right? So there's no doubt in your mind now that blackness is associated with genius. The formula that you have there has the ultimate genius in it. So Einstein had to sweat to explain the bending of light waves around a big star or a big planet. I just sat in front of you and I gave it to you. You understand? Boom, it's done. No sweat.
If we were to get a PhD in mathematics, is it possible to have you supervise us if we were to do such a thing?
Yes, that you got started with the process, and you have to keep on going. You have to keep on going, and also let me give you a generalization. Generalization is that, you see, I'm showing you the geometry right now. Geometry, by the way, first, there's so much in here, okay, and but you have to keep on coming every month. You have to keep on coming. That's the real answer to your question.
Okay.
And in between those months, you must be living GAGUT, living the GAGUTical life every second of your life. That is remembering who you are.
Okay.
You must have a large picture of the GIJ Command Quarters and this one in your rooms. That reminds you of who you are. By wearing the shirt, it comes along with you where you go. So it has to be 24/7, and eventually you're going to be, Now, now that order is between you and your Creator, which is the most important relationship. Between you and any haters or anybody, that's a secondary issue. And that has been taken care of as well. Because the shirt and the books and Brother Sai has shared some of his experiences, along that line, and certainly John has his own experience in terms of, how the shirt defines you. Have the book, I have experienced it myself. When I could stick out and drive a little bit, I was once stopped by a cop, early 90s. Sorry, yeah, so it must have been early 90s or late 90s, actually, late 90s. And, and I was stopped, and the guy, wrote a ticket for me. I was some kind of neighborhood, and he said I was going 30 miles in 25 miles per hour, saying I didn't. And actually, what happened was, kind of like a Sandra Bland situation in terms of it was a design, and when somebody gets behind you, look like they're in a hurry to pass you, and you're trying to do the best you can, and either that may actually accelerate your speed a little bit, or put you in an awkward position, then they actually flash the light. So it's something they're trained to do. So anyway, so he came and he began to write the ticket and everything. As soon as he finished, he gave it to me, and I said, okay, thank you. And I said, have you finished? And he said, yes. So I said, okay. Before you go, I have something for you. Can I tell you something? He said, yes. So the book was sitting behind me, the Grand Theorem, and I picked it up. You see this book here? I like to pick it up. He said, yes. Okay. So I picked it up. I said, can you read what's the title on this book? He said, once he made an eye contact with the book, he was already devastated. And then he looked. I said, "Do you see the name of the author?"
I'm gonna have to try that when I get pulled.
Do you understand?
Yeah.
You understand? You see the name there? I said yes, and he almost felt. I mean, to say he was feeling extremely guilty was an understatement. It's almost like, let me undo it, but it was too late, So it was a lesson for him. And there were others that were more dramatic and so on and so forth. We had a brother who was working with us, Kenneth Thomas, who actually would take a copy of the book, Riemann Theorem, and go into the trains in New York City, in the subways. And anytime he saw a non-black that was cocky and disrespectful of black people, he would go and kind of sit near, get their attention, and say, well, you see this book here? He said, well, read the title, and they will read with a very, very disgusted face, and so I say, well, this is what you were trying to do. This was done by black people, okay? And it has immediate impact. But of course, Brother Thomas, he used to be a labor leader, so he knew what to do. I know black would not be as sophisticated as this, so he's naturally that kind of person. Okay, he used to be a labor leader, so he knows the dynamics are more skillful. He was getting a lot of fun out of it. But certainly, it is meant for protection, because this is what I'm telling you. Your question is a very critical question. It protects you to identify yourself. It's extremely important. You see, which is why the clear math issue is very critical. There's a whole, in other words, E minus MC squared was what rescued the Jewish people out of the gas chambers in Germany and elsewhere. So it became a requirement for them to wear the E minus MC squared is equal to 0, or what you all know as E is equal to MC squared. So, matter of fact, the development of this, like I said before, ties into E is equal to MC squared, you know, and so on. But so that's how they protected themselves. The shooting on the streets, and that was going on, you know, for the Jews. The killing by the gas chambers were one that were particularly prominent and very incredibly open and very visible. So they had to wear their formula. That's why they set up a large statue of the E is equal to MC squared. And at some point, John is going to pull that up so you can all see, but we're going to be getting there. So formulas is a God's code. Correct formulas are correct code, or a code from God that either redefines a people or clarifies their definition. Let me go over that again. A formula, if it is correct, is understood as coming from God. And because only God could provide formulas, except, of course, this is the totality of all formulas. That obviously can even overwhelm someone. In other words, what was being found previously were in pieces, one little bit here and there, and so on and so forth. What we have here is the totality of it. And so when Professor Glover was saying, yes, God has ordained Professor Yibo as the most intelligent human being or creature that can never be surpassed. You can't top this one. There's nothing to do. There's nothing beyond this. The only thing beyond is God, because God is in the real space-time. In other words, etas of n defines God, or etas of infinity defines God. So, so now, E minus MC squared was God order telling the Jewish persecutors the Jewish people have value. They're not supposed to be gas chamber material. And that was their salvation. So before that, God gave the Anglo-Saxons GM1 M2 minus FR squared is equal to 0. That's through Isaac Newton. And they became recognized as being precious human beings, to the point where they feel they could give orders to people. And of course, there was a lot of misuse and so on and so forth. But God has now not only given another formula, but the ultimate formula. GAGUT G2j equal to 0, and the solution, the equivalent, etas of n. This is forever now. So therefore, for non-blacks who have gone through this experience, and we're talking about in recent years, we began the whole process going. Like Pharaoh Shabaka and so on. Shabaka still no. But, so what's unfair, very serious unfair with clay math, they have you know, non-black membership, including WASP, Jewish, and all, and even Asians, and so on and so forth. They know formulas are presented to redefine the people or to indicate the people are precious. And so them taking the route of trying to cover our salvation has to be understood as a very serious issue. That's why this is being presented. And they unified. That's robbery. We didn't rob them of their own blessings. So it is totally unacceptable for them to come and rob, try to rob us of our own belonging. as well, Pemi Enoch has to be understood. And the fraud that I was going over in terms of explaining, reading with you yesterday, clearly shows the dynamics of that fraud. Somebody sitting down in Nigeria that was recognized supposedly as the headquarters of fraud, and BBC has no place else to go but go to the headquarters of fraud. You understand?
Of
the
course.
The headquarters, so-called headquarters of 419, is there you're going to go and look for a mathematician that supposedly solved, Riemann hypothesis. You know that. You understand? So, but God has busted the whole leveling to begin with. So you can see there's a lot of inconsistencies that disproves them or show them as being non-righteous. Because when GAGUT was announced, it was written off as, oh, they kept on saying Nigerian fraud and all that. And you have no idea what God was doing with me. I mean, God energized me to the point where the spiritual thing that was coming out of me is, hey, try to call black people fraud, because then you make my day. Really, that's the irony of it. It made my day to see, to have anybody challenge GAGUT, because it is so powerful. You understand? So in a way, it destroys all those labels for black people, not just Nigerians, but black people altogether.
Especially with the history of having everything we've had being stolen from us. I mean, to even call us the fraud is just terrible.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's absolutely correct, because, like I said before, Africans never steal. So stealing, you understand, is a foreign idea to us. There's no reason for an African to steal. African has so much brains. What is he stealing? Why? You understand? So God busted, the whole fraud about calling Africans 419. It was with such a pleasure. And ironically, Brother Ken Thomas, is a great brother. I hope all is well with him. When I first encountered him, it was in Harlem, and I was making a presentation in a place as a slave name called Cotton Club. Okay, and so they all came to see me there, and after I was done with my presentation, this probably was 1999, right? Somewhere there, okay. 1999. And so after the presentation, they followed me, and especially him. He came to, come and say, brother, that act which you put up was dynamite, he says. Man, you lied very well. You understand? He said, you did such a beautiful propaganda for black people over there. That's all he could think. And then he said to me, but he says, brother, now tell me the truth. You understand? Yeah. Now, please tell me the truth, okay?
He wants you to be like him.
Yeah. It's like, is there any part of what you said and you were telling us that it's really true? And if so, how much of it? And so just from my own information, so I know what I can explain to people. And he was very serious. And I looked at him and I laughed and I laughed and I said, brother, everything I presented is infallible. He said, are you sure? I said, of course. He said, are you sure? I said, just point out anyone, I can go over it again with you. He stayed there and actually marveled for a while. He said, well, if you're sure, then I'm going to invest my savings in creating a banner, large banner on GAGUT. And sure enough, he came up with somewhere in the neighborhood of like $1,600, somewhere there, and actually created a banner, very large banner that was Yeah, you're going to be showing the banner? Yeah, okay. Just hold on so that Brother Glover pulls up the banner so you can see. I think he may have maybe able to find a picture of it. Okay?
Hey, Professor, how can I use that as a meme? Because I'm about to send that. I'm definitely about to send that.
Just 1 second.
Okay.
So can you all see?
Yeah. How can
Okay.
is it possible to send me the email of that picture? I want to use that as a meme
Definitely. You can
for
send that.
for
Yeah,
social media.
definitely.
This is a banner created in 1999
Yes.
after the meeting with Professor Yibo at the Cotton Club in Harlem.
Yes.
This banner was actually presented in front of the Adam Clayton Powell Jr. Building in Harlem,
Yes.
and was actually used in the Harlem Week Parade
Yes.
in August of 2001 as well.
That's right. That's right. So now, so therefore, you can see, even right these dynamics, you can see the kind of parallels and oppositions and so on and so forth. So you can see that's black and non-black, black and so on. So and that is basically that was 1999. A year later on was when Clay Mathematics Institute was set up. Okay, so it's been a long kind of thing. So the equivalent of what Clay did is like let's say in the 1930s, black people began campaigning against E minus MC squared is equal to 0 and say, well, either a black man has found something equivalent, or, you know, or in any way to actually ignore that. And if that was successful, then because the Jewish people would have been annihilated. So that's what is equivalent to in terms of what clay math is doing. Okay? Therefore, you have to understand the seriousness of this stuff. Okay, it's not something to, you know, to ignore or let it slide, because it's the most important problem with it is that it's a God order. No human dynamic is supposed to challenge a God order any more than you can challenge 2 plus 1 minus 3 is equal to 0. That's a God order. That's exactly what GAGUT represents. So this has been going this since 1999. Okay? And a year later, like I said, clay math came, and I remember when we sent in our claim for the Navy Stokes, and that was done either 1999 or 2000. Actually, it must be 2000 because they are coming to existence. The letter was sent in on, what do you call it, delivery thing was requested. And even though they signed for it, they never responded. They refused to acknowledge our claim for the Navier-Stokes equation. So, and then, you know, so therefore, you know, this thing, the thing with the G2j didn't happen just yesterday. So you can't sit by and allow that to fly. Is why you're having this encounter with reality and with the creator. Okay, because we never steal from people. We don't go and try to steal the E is equal to MC squared from people. To the contrary, we legitimize it through the development of GAGUT. You know, because that's the first thing, you know, because out of the E is equal to MC squared is how God revealed to me that if mass and energy are related, there must be a geometry that make that relationship possible. And that is what is called the conservation or the invariance equation. So the invariance and conservation equation for the mass, if Einstein was true, must be equivalent or conformal invariant with the conservation of energy. And that was what's proved, you know, geometrically that was proven. That's what God showed me. So in the process, you know, proved Einstein's theory mathematically. So, and then by extension, proved that the momentum also are invariant of the mass and the energy. And so down the line, God showed there is only one conservation, which is the Gij command equal to 0. Just one equation and one theorem. That has to be an act of God of the highest level possible. So that's where that came, but in the process legitimized mathematically the Einstein's theory. Because it was a theory now with the geometry, you know, even though they had done experimental dynamics, but what GAGUT did was a theorem, you know, in other words, making it within its constraints and actually, you know, proven truth, you know. So we did them a favor in doing that, you know, and so on and so forth. So we've not been one to, okay, so let's get back to and then you're going to bring some of the response to the clay. I'm sorry.
Is there a way I can be able to get that image?
Yes. I don't know if you could, but John can actually email the image onto you. Is that okay?
Is it probably do it?
Huh?
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah.
Okay, okay.
So I'm
So,
about to mean the package.
yes. So, okay. So, so anyway, now, so then back to clay. So therefore they started, after seeing what was going on with GAGUT, and then they set up, and we went putting a claim. I remember a brother by the name of Donald Greaves, a brother to William Greaves, the Tony Brown's journal and all that. He saw, when he saw it, especially. Oh yeah, okay, yeah, well, you may not know because you are not around New York area, but Tony Brown was very popular on the PBS program, I think it was. Anyway, so we moved on, and then come 2005, actually 2004, we were invited to Nigeria to confront all of the humanity, all of humanity, in terms of their mathematicians and scientists. And God prevailed again for over 30 days. So in the process, every mathematician or their representatives, there are people who were watching it from remote, those who traveled there, everybody that was United Nations, UNESCO, all of them were in there. Canadian ambassador was in on some of the meetings and congratulated me and everything. So it completely demonstrated this was a God order. And of course, there were plans that were supposed to be put in place, and Jim Crow went everywhere. Since then, Jim Crow has been, opposing a way to get black people to focus on applying it, in terms of really getting our folks to rally around it and rediscover themselves through GAGUT and verifying infallibly. Okay, yes, let me see that. Okay, so again, this is the form. So now, for the sake of Riemann hypothesis, from that equation, the is equal to MC squared, the geometry of the Riemann hypothesis calls for n to be 0. So then once n has been specified to be 0, and then what comes out is a Gij of eta sub 0. So the next thing is, okay, that's the infallible general solution. You now have to check what is called the boundary or initial conditions or point conditions, which is, in this case, the Riemann hypothesis itself. Easily you come up with a specific Gij eta sub 0. And that is the minus eta sub 0 natural log of, and I have to get into a point where I can show you, natural log of 2 plus log of u as a function of eta sub 0 times eta, e to the power I times 2j plus 1 pi. That's exactly the invariant, the G2j solution. I'm going to show you the, but I want to tell you that it came from here. It came, okay. It came from this formula, eta sub n, which another was saying, yes, eta sub 0 is the one that actually constructs is the fundamental pieces that construct the actual geometry of Riemann hypothesis, or the theorem that Riemann hypothesis is trying to guess. But in this case, it will give it exactly. And the formula that I just gave you is the exact thing that Riemann was looking for. He guessed it. And so you see the actual solution or theorem, and you see the guess of the solution or theorem. And then you'll be able to see if they match exactly, they coincide exactly, or there's an overlap. And what God has done is to say, yes, there is an overlap in terms of the actual truth from where his guess came from. Geometrically, they're similar. But the overlap in terms of the position of things and the shortcomings of the guess, as expected, were made shown, were revealed by God. That's how the solution came out. So you have to be a non-mathematician. I mean, you have to have no understanding of geometry to even think twice about seeing the infallibility of the G2j solution. And God sent it in this particular time for purpose of getting your attention to this, because it gives you an opportunity now to, hey, listen to this and, pick up the pieces that you can grab around and keep on working at it to verify for yourself in terms of what it is we're dealing with, in terms of whether it is right for you to allow somebody that has been tormenting your life for 2,500 years to be telling you how, be teaching you about your life, especially when GAGUT has proven that you understand you are so far superior on intelligence level than such a group of people. And to compare that with the pains and the suffering that we've been going through for the last 2,500 years. So it's like a juncture where you must take account of things and really, transform into this, the new God order. Actually, God order is always there. And so that's what this is about. So in this little compact thing that I just gave you, the dynamics, the building block for the Riemann hypothesis, which is that will construct the real thing that he was trying to guess at, which is eta sub 0. So I just identified the n out of it, and that's all that is needed. So that n now goes into, putting into account what is the initial condition. Initial condition here is the guess by Riemann that has been, which has been symbolically verified through computations. But the key word is superficially or apparently verified. There's something deeper, and that comes through the geometry. And the reality then is that, yes, when you do computation using an infinite series, you will never be able to keep all the terms. If you only put partial terms. So if you use the results from partial terms, you have to know the limitations of that. The only way that the results from the partial terms are going to replicate the real results is if those partial sums approach the real number, the infinite terms, which is what we call convergence. If there's a chance that there's going to be converging of the partial terms or finite terms into the infinite terms, then and only then can you actually say that when you keep partial terms, your results are going to reflect the real story. And so, but in the region where Riemann was guessing that, that was not anywhere near the truth. There's no convergence there. So anything that you compute is only good for the amount of terms that you kept, which is what is called a finite field. So finite field cannot represent what is supposed to be an infinite field. I know that much you can all feel for it. You could understand some of the basis of what I'm saying. You cannot approximate something with another unless there's a justification, a proof that they could be approximated. That's basically what's the core of the problem. God revealed all that to me in a very elegant manner. First, I have to find the independent variable, that's eta sub 0. N is equal to 0. And then go into now the dynamics. It's one of the outside, you know, after GAGUT itself is extremely elegant. This one is extremely elegant. Just like Professor Luchin said, you know, GAGUT was proven in a mathematically elegant manner. By the way, you're going to pull some of that, you know, that at the letter if you have some of it. Okay. Now, so this is the summary. I'd like you to ask questions in terms of how Riemann hypothesis was solved in terms of going through the actual exact solutions from the building block, which is eta sub n, to the construction of actually Gij, in this case, which is a G2j. That's basically what I gave you. Okay? So then now we're going to go now to the dynamics of Jim Crow cover-up. I gave you a piece of that already. There's a lot of motivation for them. And even by 1999, based on the picture that you just saw, there was already dynamics going on the ground that, hey, black people can't come and take over the whole world, you know, out of thin air. But that's what God has done. And although 25 years, 26 years later, our people are still struggling, what remains is the formula. It was Gij, J equal to 0, then it's still Gij, J equal to 0 now. And it's a wishful thinking of Jim Crow in terms of clean math. They're going to really wish it away. No, it's not going to happen. So therefore, they came up with Poincare, and they brought in a Russian, wasn't even an American, and gave him the award and all that. Now, the first problem is that you can be getting an award from an incompetent set of organizations. That's a number one deal that you must deal with. Okay? Clear math is not qualified to grade any work by black people because they're non-black. At 19, eta sub 19, they can't be grading a race that has eta sub 28. Now, I'd like you to get your input on that one. Do you understand? Can you all hear me?
Which one?
Yes, I understand what you're saying.
Yes. This point is extremely. Yes. In other words, you don't expect people with low IQ to be teaching geniuses or grading the work of a genius. A teacher, once you've been accepted as a teacher, go ahead. Okay. A teacher, once the teacher has been accepted as a teacher, the teacher has a lot of power. So it would be a mistake to give such a huge power to somebody that's totally unqualified. because out of that comes the problem of actually fraud, misrepresentation, and more fraud. You don't need that. So the Göttingen says very clear that your race is the one that has the last word in mathematics. And since every discipline, the highest level of understanding is when it reaches a mathematical level. That's why you hear about mathematical biology. That's taking biology to higher grounds. Gagotical biology is the ultimate. And that's what we have here. So on that note, mathematics can be viewed as the ultimate understanding of every subject, because every subject is embedded in mathematics. Gagotics is the ultimate level of understanding of every subject. Mathematics was the highest level before Gagotics, because mathematics. Yes, go ahead.
So this is my question on the biology part for like GAGUT and biology. How exactly, or GAGUT in chemistry or GAGUT in biochemistry, how exactly, what differentiates GAGUT biochemistry from regular?
Yeah. Well, just like you see here in the Riemann piece, everything is geometry. Everything is space-time. The J is the space-time, and the I is the material. Material simply means a particular unit, material unit that has a constitution in terms of the dynamics of dilation of space-time within its contained. And the way you understand it is from a fundamental definition in science that says matter is something that occupies space. You've heard that before, right?
Yeah, that's us.
Okay. Matter is an entity that occupies space. Therefore, space is very fundamental. Before GAGUT, people couldn't really able to actually feel it. So, because in effect, what God has done through GAGUT is to actually say, yes, if space-time is very critical to the definition of matter, you might as well conclude that matter is made out of a space-time, since no matter exists if there's no space-time. Can you see that? Can anyone see that?
Yes. I see that.
Yes.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, I see it.
Yes. So therefore, the disciplines therefore can be visualized as the eyes, which is the material. Okay. So therefore, you want to study mathematical biology or gagomatic biology, you just choose an eye, the material, which in case is the material, biological material. And then the whole field of biology is identified. So one material unit isolates that particular field.
Was it through the eye where you made the discovery on hydrogen?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, not only on the material building block, but the space-time building block as well. It's extremely beautiful. Do you understand? It's extremely beautiful. I mean,
was it also through the eye where you found out about life?
The eye has several components. As a lens, and as a space-time unit itself. It has a shape, okay, elliptical and all that. Do you understand me? It's geometry. Science of space-time. That's
So
what
the G is pretty much like, and the I is pretty much geometry.
Yes, you know, so the science of space-time is what geometry is, and space-time is God.
So what about the J? What other mathematics would the J usually represent?
Well, the J is the space-time. Okay, the I is the material. So, like I said, if you want to look at the biological material, then the GIJ in that case will be the GAGUT of biology, which is the idea.
I understand that.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that G pretty much represents all the forces and unknown forces. And isn't that kind of like a physics thing? And the I, you said, also represents the biochemistry. But the J, does it represent anything in the math and science field? Or, like, say, does J represent something like, would it represent, like, I don't know, chemistry or biology, or what would the J represent?
Right. In other words, picture the solar system or any piece of space-time. There are any numbers of phenomena that goes on in that space-time. Any number.
It's like a black hole.
Yeah. So what's important, in GAGUT, all those phenomena, maybe as plenty as you can think of, but the fundamental component is space-time. That's all it is. So if you can focus on the space-time, for example, the planet Earth, if you look, first you look at the sphere or spheroid, the sphere that the Earth is supposed to approximate, or an ellipsoid, okay? Yeah. So, so then that is when you're talking about the planet itself. That's what you're really looking at. And that is captured right from eta sub 1. From here.
Okay.
Do you understand?
Yes.
The totality of the planet is covered by eta sub 1 here. The totality of the planet. That's the miracle we're talking about.
So if you were to create a new, you just have to understand ethers of 1, pretty much. Yeah.
In other words, ethers of 1 approximates the shape of the planet Earth. And within that planet Earth, you have humans and animals running around on it and so on and so forth. But their fundamental base is that eta sub n. And so you want to check into what is going on within the individual components. Again, it's a space-time. So you're talking about, because within the particular system, you could have more variations in their material. Okay? Their material dynamics in terms of a difference between a human being and a piece of stone, in terms of their material and so on and so forth, okay, or their components, like you said, the eye and all that. So all those becomes the details, but what is fundamental through all that is the space-time. That's the J. Do you understand?
Okay.
Do you understand?
And the floor space.
Huh?
So space-time is pretty much like the floor of space, like what Earth is sitting on.
Yes. It's, in other words, the universe is really God.
Yeah.
And the concentration is how thick, how much material compacted in any particular one space. That's what a material is. In other words, material is identified by the density of space in that material. Yes. So like a piece of iron and a feather and a piece of potato or whatever have different constitution and the compactness in each of those. But they could occupy a similar amount of space or similar kind of space, but their thickness and their densities are different. You understand?
So pretty much like say if you understand I, which is the fabric of space, which includes matter, and you're looking at a compound like H2O. Since we now know that everything originates from hydrogen, would it be possible from knowing the knowledge of H2O to change water into a completely different compound just by understanding hydrogen with one atom?
Yes, that's correct. That's the whole thing that GAGUT brought about, and that's the revolutions that are going to be following the GAGUT, which is why you have to put your eyes on the prize. You're supposed to be in charge.
Most definitely.
Huh?
I said, oh, most definitely.
Oh yeah. Well, so that is why what I was saying before. You have to know the value of this thing, not only to put your resources behind it, but you have to stay with it. When you hear that from ground zero, that is not the way to make money, because GAGUT is the real money. Do you understand? Yes. That part is extremely critical. We had a brother who we're trying to, get across and get him to begin to understand things, and he seemed to understand up until a point. Then he lost focus, and then he had begun the process of registering, and then he actually attended the briefing, but he began to lose focus to the point where he was mistaking the Jim Crow dollar as being important, or have relatively so important. And so we had to advise him to say, look, even Jim Crow knows there are things.
Dollar's not.
Do you understand? There are things the Jim Crow dollar cannot buy. And especially for us, that is certainly very true. A Jim Crow dollar owned by a black person does not, before GAGUT, does not have as much value as the same Jim Crow dollar owned by non-blacks.
True, 100%.
You understand? And the example I used to exactly, and so therefore the Jim Crow dollar is not a real dollar. Do you understand? So, and I used to give Mr. Cosby, I used to give him as an example. At some point when he really became very successful.
This is back in the late 80s, early 90s. Perhaps the late 80s is more during the height of his Cosby show.
Exactly. Yeah, he literally had enough money to be able to buy
NBC,
the
TV station.
The TV station, and he tried to put in a bid, and he was rejected.
Did you all know that?
Did some of you?
Yeah,
No,
I didn't know that.
Yes.
Yeah, I had an opportunity. I had an opportunity to meet Mr. Cosby when his son was alive. My brother and his son attended Morehouse together, so I met Bill Cosby, and I went to his New York residence.
Oh, yes. What is that dynamics? So I said, look, he can't buy. He has the money, but he couldn't buy NBC. So therefore, his dollar is not, does not have the buying capability as a dollar from Rockefeller or any of the non-blacks. So And that artificial dynamics is set up by the manipulations of people's relative importance, okay, which God has now solidified completely. See, what we're going through right now, you understand, you can't pay for it. Nobody can pay for the blessing that God is giving us here right now. Nobody, there's no amount of money that can pay. You understand? Because it wasn't even expected to be here. So how could you buy something that was not in existence, right?
You can't.
Can you all see that logic?
Yes.
You see,
Miss Lawson, do you see it?
Yes, thank you.
thank you, thank you. You see, so this brother, what happened was, he began to act up and say, yeah, I paid the money and all that. And I told John to tell him, say, listen, brother, calm down. If the GAGUT didn't come from black people would have no chance of even hearing about it for another maybe 400 or 500 years. And it won't matter how much money you're willing to pay, you definitely will not go near it.
Definitely as a tactic, they'll never give that to us, especially from the history.
Exactly. So, and the examples abound. Okay, the science about, for example, you you understand the bathrooms, for black and nobody. You understand me? There are things that you're not supposed to be able to do and all that. GAGUT has busted all that down. That's how Obama ended up in the White House, or what was actually really a black house. This is the equation that got Obama in. So, therefore, this is no amount of dollar could have gotten a black person into the White House. But this did it. Therefore, this is far superior to Jim Crow dollar. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Can anybody see that?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, Professor.
Oh, I definitely see it.
Yes. That is, in other words, the real money is intelligence. This is intelligence. It's the real currency. And like I said of Brother Cosby, the money that he thought had a lot of value could not do what he was expecting the money to do. On the other hand, if he had put intelligence together to build the Channel 4, the NBC, nobody would have constrained him. Do you understand? He needed to bring people together, design the building, get your communication system and set it up. That all comes from the brains. That's the real money. You can't say, gee, I'm going to fool around and borrow some money and come and buy something. No. The person that designed it will decide if he wants to sell the thing to you or not. Do you understand?
Yes.
Is that point understood?
Please, everyone
Yes,
answer.
Yes, the point is understood.
This is very critical because, see, in other words, somebody was going to make a comment?
Does everyone answer? I mean, did everyone answer in terms of understanding?
Yes,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay. Absolutely. Therefore, this is the real money. There are people, and that happened before we were firebombed. People wanted to buy the books so you don't have a chance at it. And some of you have heard the story before. They were prepared to pay any amount of money, just like you know, the price on the Discovery book is $1,625. You understand? So that's a way of keeping people who cannot directly or individually afford that away from the book. That's one dimension. One dimension is that you could even have that amount of money, and we're in a position to make that decision to say, look, we don't even want to sell it at the $1,625. Or somebody even offers twice the amount, we say we're not going to sell it to you. Because it's an extraordinary blessing. There's no real value that you can put on it. It's an act of God. It's unique. It's intelligence. It's a piece of God. That must be appreciated. Extremely serious stuff. Because something that you don't know their value, even if they come to you, they're going to dissipate. They're going to go the way they came. And this is so critical that you cannot allow that to happen. So it must be critical. The same thing, say, because if you don't know the value of something, it won't mean anything to you. You know, it won't matter. So this brother, when he was throwing the thing, and I said, listen, brother, calm down. And, you know, trying to get into the kind of, you know, operation kind of dynamics where it was getting worse. So I said, look, I asked John to consider trying to talk better with him and so on, and it still didn't work. So I said, well, if you're going to bring negativity into an act of God like this, then you really do not understand the value of this stuff. So I asked John to refund his money. His money was refunded. It was later on that his head began to cool down, which was another way of saying the Jim Crow dollar you put in behind the stuff has very little value. The material is the real value. The formula is the real value. It's not some arbitrary money that is put against it. That is inferior. That's just a convenient dynamics to it. So if you understand the value of the formula, you will know that that transcends, that's far superior to the Jim Crow dollar. So just because you put a Jim Crow dollar down does not mean you should go wild and say, yeah, therefore, you understand, you can't do that, because the creator or the owner of the property has a right of selling the thing or not selling it. That's why productivity and intelligence is the real money. Because once you have that, you don't really bother about currencies anymore. So anyway, so that is the dynamics of, but in terms of your security, it's extremely important that you deal with the publications and your shirts and conduct yourself. You know, like I showed you, a brother from Cincinnati was giving advice to black people, and he kind of, you know, explained the dynamics of what I did in terms of somebody stopped me and was ready to give me a ticket, and even though I didn't like it, I allowed him to write the ticket. It was after he's written the ticket, he has satisfied himself, that I took, and I had the opportunity of actually introducing myself. And he got it, and I kind of said to myself, before he does this to another black person, he would think twice. Because you can see he was literally free, you know, I mean, he frizzled down to nothing once he saw the book. And was overwhelmed. Do you understand? So I left with the consolation that he will think twice before he stops another black person, because he wouldn't have no idea what other things he might discover in the process. You understand? So therefore, that is why it's very important to actually identify, conduct yourself in a way that is consistent with the way you're created. So, Paul, I wanted to bring the letter that we're constructing for Clay. I'm sorry, for BBC. Okay, you have that on the system.
Just 1 second, everybody.
And and then the AMS and all that, just like the package, the attachment. So I could go over some of the things for them.
Yeah.
I also need that. So everybody looking at, can you see the screen, everybody?
Yeah, yes, Professor.
Yes,
Okay. This is what I shared with you yesterday. I want you to be familiar with it again today. And it's the dynamics of how you understand the process by which the whole stealing and that has been done in terms of stealing our resources and legacies. And as I told you, this particular phase began in 2000 when clay was established. But because our people were not actually in tune with the implications and what GAGUT means and what the other parties of the society were planning to do, it was not easy for us to actually get a clarity on it. And that's how this developed. So it has been going on right from 1990, but particularly since 2000, when clay was established. And so this complaint, therefore, became critical in order for them to understand something we understand. We're able to understand the unfairness, to say the least. But unfairness is only fueled, really, by our not really getting into action in terms of being proactive. For example, and although they interfere a great deal, when, especially after 2002, when everybody was waiting for the Nobel Award for GAGUT, every black person was waiting, and they didn't see it. There was a whole lot of disappointments. At some point, even the New York City were so sure, that's the New York City Council, they were so sure with some of the brothers who were in the council then, they were so sure they were going to award the Nobel Prize to GAGUT. They were prepared to, they were ready to celebrate right in the City Hall. When it was announced, GAGUT wasn't given. Everybody was so disappointed, and that's on both sides, both blacks and non-blacks. So it was clear something unholy was going on. And I remember telling black people that, hey, how could you even be so critical of non-blacks in terms of denying us a prize when you have not given an award or a prize to GAGUT yourselves? And that was an eye-opening, from a state of mind that we've been forced into, which is only non-blacks can give prizes. And even though people were trying to struggle with that and try to overcome, it wasn't really reaching any serious level yet. So that led to the dynamics of setting up the African International Prize for Science and Technology. But all along the way, see, the part which you all need to understand that is more disgusting is that it's bad enough for somebody to say they're not going to give you a prize because it's their decision. What is disgusting and totally not only unnecessary but out of place is the same person that refused to give you an award that you were qualified for does everything he can to stop you from creating your own prizes. That is the part which is extremely disgusting. And that was what was done in the process of the African International Prize. After a lot of struggle with their forces, black people were able to agree they're going to set up the prize. And the motion, was created and so on and so forth. And there was collaboration between both sides of the Atlantic by black people here and over there. And it was done. So the next thing is how to raise the money. Jim Crow dumped $55 million to campaign against GAGUT and try to undo what has been done unanimously already. So, but luckily, the award was given, and among other things, it was in recognition of solutions from GAGUT that includes Riemann Hypothesis, although Riemann Hypothesis was not mentioned individually. But it says the geometric solutions, in other words, all solutions that can be constructed from GAGUT are included, even though the $2 million that was awarded obviously was too small for that. But the spirit was captured in that process. So then the next thing is, okay, to raise the money, and Jim Crow really, so therefore you can see Jim Crow is going out of their way not only to refuse to give you recognition, but to terrorize your own process of trying to generate your own recognition. That is what is criminal. And I hope if you all understand what I'm saying, you will see what I mean when I say it is criminal. It's like a neighbor not only not sharing their food with you and your family, but try to prevent you from providing for your family and yourself. That's what it's equivalent to. That's what's equivalent. And in that case, you really see that's evil. Because that's like saying the neighbor should starve to death. I'm saying, we should be starved with recognition. In terms of not having recognition at all, so we could come to a standstill and stop glorifying the Almighty God. That's a very evil kind of thing. So what you're seeing here that is responsible for this complaint is along that line. So yes, when they did not give Nobel or Clay, the Africans came together and said, yeah, we have to show them that they have to recognize us. So African International Prize is Science Technology. And they go ahead and sabotage and try to attack anyone. So that is what is ungodly, to say the least. It's really, really nasty. So that's what we see in this complaint here. Okay, and as I read, hello?
Yeah, also, Professor, you should also be receiving honorary doctorate degrees from HBCUs. I was sharing this with my sister. She said that's something that the black colleges and universities should be offering you. Honorary doctorate. You should be getting that too.
Yeah, well, that is if there are people who can communicate to the HBCU, because they're not allowing GAGUT on the campus right now in any HBCU because Jim Crow is actually scaring them.
Yeah, especially with the fact that they're not all fully black owned, I believe. I'm not sure. I mean, as of
okay. Wait until come back. What did you say?
Oh, I said I think I heard that there's been a lot more enrollment of non-black teachers into such institutions.
Exactly.
So I think this has funding.
That's also correct, sister. That's part of the dynamics. when Maurice Brown was being discredited, or whatever they call it, and we tried to talk to the administration and kind of consider even taking it over, we were not getting cooperation from the administration that was even then supposed to be black. So we're talking about a real false sense of security in terms of thinking black people are running the show. One of the worst insults we've gotten along that line came from Tuskegee. When we called Tuskegee up, the administration, we said, look, we're going to be dedicating some of the monthly presentations in honor of Professors Booker T. Washington and Washington Carver. And literally, they laughed at us. It's almost like saying that it will never happen. Or if it will happen, it will never get any participation from them. That's the kind of arrogance we saw.
Not to mention the president was non-black.
Oh, and the president of Tuskegee was not even non-black, which is consistent with what...
oh, yeah, it's that mindset coming over again.
Huh?
Over and over again. I said that's that same slave mindset coming over and over again.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really deep. That's deep.
Yes.
So, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So that's what we're dealing with. But this is why this is important. This is what we're sharing right now. It becomes important along that line. Because a demand is going to be made by our people on several levels.
I know of one person, professor, who's actually trying to build a school. Who's trying to? He's a notable. That's actually trying to build a school. I believe his name is Dr. Umar. He's building a school in Virginia.
Okay, Johnson, Umar Johnson.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Well, do you understand? What happens is they will have to be given an ultimatum that says, you want to call yourself a black school, you must be prepared to teach GAGUT.
Yeah, it's Pan-African. Yeah, Pan-African.
Okay, that is and that can be worked on by the parents of students that have gone into those schools, the alumni, and community at large, and the churches. As a matter of fact, the Progressive Baptist Convention, that's Reverend King's organization, had actually developed a GAGUT resolution, which was passed unanimously, at least in New York State, that compels the black colleges to work with GAGUT. But you understand that's almost 10 years ago. Actually, probably more. About 10 years, roughly. About 12 years ago. And still nothing has happened yet. Because they fear. We had one professor from Savannah State University, which is supposed to be a black school in Georgia. And when he heard about the G2j solution, and he has some background there, and he said, oh yes, I'm going to register to come to the briefing. A few days later on, he stopped communicating with us altogether. So obviously somebody must have warned him to stay away from GAGUT. So this is the kind of dynamics that's going on. And like John was, I think he was reminding me of the incident in Virginia, or somewhere in the South, where a black university was campaigning against GAGUT and had inappropriate people make statements like GAGUT is too dangerous for the minds of the black children or black students. Okay, this actually was done in writing, and in Texas, all kinds of horrible things are going on in everything that you see in Texas is consistent with their backwardness and the lack of understanding. That's why get involved with this particular thing is very important. On the surface, it would look as if it sounds militant, but it's not militant. If you remember the Kante-Kunte dynamics and the mode, what was shown through the video or the film is to indicate it was a failure. Okay? But that's not real reality. In that form, it actually serves as an indoctrination process to discourage people. And that is the story of GAGUT. Because of the many, many, many obstacles that were put in my way, I could have arrived at such a conclusion. But God prevailed. And today,
That's right.
you understand? So, Kante Kunte, even if he didn't succeed in his generation, the other folks would have continued that legacy. And, yes, and that's what we're talking about here, especially in this particular position. Now, you have a lot of things like Professor Adam Clayton Powell would say, what's in your hand? You have the whole universe in your hand. Nothing can stop you right now. Only you're getting in sync and in tune with it is the challenge that you have. Huh?
Yeah, Professor, but you also want to make sure that no one plagiarizes, because Jim Crow will plagiarize like they did last week with Michelle Obama's speech. So
They have to understand it first before they plagiarize it.
So, and they will plagiarize, and we're now living in an Orwellian society where they will say what is now bad is good. They're allowing this, they really are pushing for this dictator to enter the White House. And that's going to, huh?
No, I also want to add to what you're saying, is to deceive at all costs.
Yeah, deceive at all costs. And that includes, and I mean, I'm thinking about the spiritual level of GAGUT. I mean, in some ways, I'm feeling is that's another form of undermining GAGUT, this political process.
Yes, yes. Well, that is excellent. Those are excellent points.
It's a George Orwell thing that we're living through right now.
Yeah, yes, but you see, GAGUT is superior to all of those. Hillary Clinton has presented GAGUT on the Senate floor. And Trump.
Wow, because of that, she's got my vote. Okay.
Okay, and John McCain also made a presentation. As a matter of fact, John McCain confronted NASA and NSF, and we have some of the writings, with us here. And the one that really did the most battle was Professor Senator Daniel Moynihan. He took on the National Science Foundation as well, and they had and he prevailed. Okay, so, but Trump, if he's German, the Germans have the ones that have given, the highest recognition to GAGUT so far outside of the black world in terms of the Göttingen peace. So he will know what we're talking about. But that also means that you have to be up to speed. Because if you don't show you know as well, then you lose out. But if you show you know what it is that's in your hand, then he's going to bargain with you. Because as a German, you will understand what Göttingen means. So either of those two that are running will have some sense of GAGUT. Yeah, I just told them that. So their point is, in that case, therefore, you become the critical point. If you begin to get your books, okay, get your GAGUT shirts, get your monthly briefing, which is this point is so critical. It's so critical. And that's why I was trying to give an example of that brother who did not understand what GAGUT represents, tried to compare GAGUT to the Jim Crow dollar. GAGUT is so way superior to Jim Crow dollar that has to be part of your blood, because what Jim Crow dollar couldn't do for us was done by GAGUT, which is to get us into the White House. GAGUT is the only thing that could have done that for us. No, Bill Cosby still had money then. We couldn't, when Jesse Jackson was running, GAGUT wasn't here yet.
I told John that I was going to get license plates with that, a formula, GIJ, comma J equals 0. I'm going to get personalized.
Well, you know, one of the audience members also has done that, Mr. Blake.
Where? And where? What state?
Mr. Hearn, would you like to comment on that?
I'm in Maryland.
Yes, sir. I have GIJ, comma J equals 0 on my license plate, but I'm in California.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm in Maryland, so
you'll be the second one in the world.
Issue me one. Okay.
Yeah.
You'll be
that's wonderful.
Second one in the world. So that'll be good. It keeps me safe. Right. That's how I feel.
That's great. That's great. Okay.
So great minds think alike. So.
Yeah. Right.
That's a good idea.
All right.
Yes. Okay. So we're going to. John is trying to load something. Like I said, whichever one you have first, I'll take that first.
Yes, sir.
In other words,
they can hear you. So you can talk while I'm getting it.
Okay. So now that's something that you need to work on together, collaboratively. It's very important. See, there's a power in numbers, and there is, you understand, that has to be taken advantage of. You got to each one teach many. You can begin with teach one, and then you begin to double up, because that's what's required here. And you have to you can follow the examples of the Jewish people. Okay, now this is.
It's not up here.
Okay.
Need to see it.
Yeah. The Jewish people galvanized, behind Einstein, and they did miracles for themselves. Okay? Today, Israel has an atomic bomb, which is expected because that came from an idea from a Jewish scientist. So, okay. So this is the letter to the BBC. So you get that,
Can everyone see it?
Can you all see that? Can everybody see that?
Yes, thank you.
It's kind of very tiny. Yeah. Yeah, that's, yeah, so, and you need to be aware of this because their diplomacy, what is called diplomacy, is